is John Garrison. And John, you've got a bachelor's degree in wildlife biology from Frostburg State and a master's in conservation biology, and you are currently the conservation director for the Susquehannock Wildlife Society, and you've been studying wood turtle populations in central Maryland for quite some time. Like many of our herps, these animals are currently in decline, so hopefully we can come away tonight with some information about why that's happening and what we need to know. So thanks so much for taking the time to meet with us and share your expertise. I've been told as folks have questions, you can just go ahead and type them in the chat, and we will have some time at the end to get to those and dive through that. So I'm going to stop talking now and turn things over to you, John. And thank you once again for being here with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. And thanks to everybody for taking time out of your night to come and listen to me ramble about turtles. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you all about a species that's near and dear to my heart and the heart of my organization, Susquehannock Wildlife Society. It is the wood turtle and all of the wonders that it has. It's a really unique species. It lives in a very unique landscape and it is declining, and we are studying it here in Central Maryland. And I'm going to hop right into it here. Get a little bit of a computer thing going on down here in the left-hand corner. I'm about to take care of this. All right. Yeah, so just a bit of an overview. I kind of broke this into two parts. The first part is just a general overview of the wood turtle itself. I'm going to talk a little bit about its natural history, its habitat requirements, teach you how to identify one, where their current range is in the United States and Canada. We'll talk about some of the threats and why wood turtles are important, go into a little bit about their status and conservation at the moment. And then part B is going to be more about the research and conservation work we're doing currently at Susquehannock Wildlife Society to study their populations here in Maryland. Just a little bit about myself. My name is John Garrison. I'm the conservation director for Susquehannock Wildlife Society. I'm a wildlife ecologist. I specialize in herpetology and studying freshwater turtles. So most of the work that I've done has been with these three species you see on the screen. Up at the top, we've got bog turtle, and we've got spotted turtle here, and wood turtle down at the bottom. Would somebody be able to unmute and tell me if you can see my cursor or not? Because I'm pointing at things. I'm unsure if you're all able to see it. Yes? No?
Yes,
Yes,
we can see your
we
cursor.
can see the cursor.
Awesome, great. All right. Yeah, I got a bachelor's degree at Frostburg State University. I'm studying wildlife biology. At that time, I was doing a lot of research with copperheads with Susquehannock Wildlife Society. And then I went and got a master's degree from Antioch University New England up in New Hampshire. There I was studying spotted turtles in relation to their nesting ecology. I was looking at nest site selection and success. And I was using trail cameras to better understand the predator community and what sort of human recreation was taking place at the nesting sites so that we can better understand those dynamics and protect them a little better. So yeah, I work for Susquehannock Wildlife Society. We're a young but rapidly growing nonprofit. We were founded in 2011. And in 2015, the state of Maryland purchased the property that we manage, and we've been managing it for about 10 years now. It's a very exciting time for our organization because we will be opening here in the near future. If you don't follow us on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, go ahead and give us a follow so you're in tune with our events and everything that we're doing coming up. But we have a 20-acre property in Darlington, Maryland, and we oversee the wildlife research, wildlife education, and wildlife rescue for the lower Susquehanna River Basin. And on our 20-acre property, we have outdoor and indoor classrooms, we have a wildlife center that we will be opening very shortly, and we have trails that go through a forest, and we have about 4.5 acres of restored meadow for pollinators and grassland nesting birds. So we'll hop right into the wood turtle. I know this is what you all came here to listen about. This is a really interesting species, and it's easily identified. A lot of the turtles throughout the United States and Canada are kind of confusing when you look at them and you try to identify them in the field or through photos. So like painted turtles look very similar to red-eared sliders, and red-eared sliders look very similar to cooters. And from my perspective, and wood turtles look very distinctive, so they're really easy to identify. They've got these bright arms and legs, and they have a bright orange neck. They have a dark head, and they have these pronounced scales on the front of their legs. If you're ever lucky enough to get close to a wood turtle, you will see that within its dark head, it has a dark eye with a dark pupil, and it usually has a gold ring around its pupil that looks somewhat like an eclipse. The top of the shell, also known as the carapace, is really looks woody, which is how this species got its name. We refer to it as the wood turtle. It looks very like a trunk of wood. This juvenile is displaying that really nicely. This juvenile was basking on a log, and its carapace, or the top of its shell, pretty much blends in with this trunk of the tree very perfectly. And their scientific name is Glyptomys insculpta, which means insculpta, sculpted. The people think that its shell looks like it's sculpted out of wood or clay, and they have that very beautiful shell. So from above, we have a male and a female. We're looking at the carapace here. On the left-hand side, we have a female, and on the right-hand side, we have a male. The female's carapace and shell overall is a little bit more domed than the male's. And here we have a duller individual in this female. And on the right-hand side, we have a brighter individual exhibiting what we refer to as the sunburst pattern, where we get these nice little patterns of orange flecking that come through on the carapace. It's really quite beautiful. The male has got more of a domed carapace, whereas the female is a little bit more flat, and the males have a little bit more furrowing in the scutes. So they have all these different plates that make up the turtle shell, which we refer to as scutes. They have 12 marginal scutes on the margins of each shell on each side, so they have 24 in total. They've got 5 vertebral scutes and 4 intermediate costal scutes. Now, you can see these concentric rings in all of the scutes, and they actually represent growth. You can actually use them to tell how old a turtle is for certain periods of time, and then after a while, it gets really hard to tell how old the turtle actually is. So we've got the carapace of the wood turtle both here, and you can tell. If you put a little mud on there, it looks pretty much just like a trunk of wood. Flip the turtle over, and we have what we refer to as the plastron. On the left-hand side, we have a wood turtle here, wood turtle male, and you can see that it's got a bit of an indentation or concavity here, and that concavity is basically so that the male can climb up on top of the female for courting. So if you have a turtle or a wood turtle with a concave shell, it's always going to be a male, whereas the female has a very flat shell. And you can see here it looks pretty much just flat as like a piece of wood. Now, the plastron on wood turtles is typically cream to yellow colored, and it has dark blotches in the borders. So you can see that here. It's pretty creamy colored, and then it's got some dark blotches. Some of the older individuals get a little bit more rough, tannic, dark looking. So here we have a male on the left and we have a female on the right. This is a very old individual with not a whole lot of annuli or growth rings on its scutes individually. That's because it's just been around for so long and they've just worn down completely. And here is a female with some of those scutes. Not as many, they're starting to wear away, but this is a really good example of the flat bottom of a shell for female and the male. Now you flip the turtles over, we've got the carapace here again, female, nice rings on her scutes, and then the male here, very old. It actually has some predator marks. This is where a predator bit it there. Also here and here, female's got some predator marks. But yeah, this male has a very large head. The males have larger heads than females. They also have larger tails. Now, here in Maryland, we're at the very southern extreme of the wood turtle's range. Here in Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia make up the very southern terminus of this wood turtle range. And they actually extend all the way up the East Coast into New Brunswick, Maine, Nova Scotia, and into Quebec. And then there's a disjunct portion of the population that occurs around the Great Lakes, mostly in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Iowa. There are some populations in Ontario and Minnesota. In Maryland, we have wood turtles primarily situated in the western portion of the state, and we do have some that occur in central Maryland in Cecil, Harford, and Baltimore counties, but primarily in Maryland, they're a western Maryland species. Here are some habitat suitability models that are looking at wood turtles throughout the Northeast here. On the left, we have a species distribution model that was published by Liz Wiley et al. 2022 in Biological Conservation. And they're looking at wood turtle streams throughout the entire range of the species in the United States in the East Coast. And the bluer shades over here represent least impacted streams are least impaired, and the red streams are more impaired. So when you look at this, you see that the region we live in, Maryland, Central Maryland specifically, very highly impaired. Western Maryland, you get a little bit less impairment. Most of that impairment is from habitat change and urban sprawl. And then if you look back up to our Maryland map here, it plays out pretty well when you compare it to both of these. You know, we've got the range, we've got a little bit of good habitat over here in the central Maryland, but most of it's out in the west. And then we have another species distribution model that was published by Malthus et al. In 2022 in Global Ecology and Conservation. They were looking at potential climate change impacts of the wood turtle, different scenarios that might play out in habitat suitability over time. And they show very similar trends. You know, you've got a little bit of climate refugium out here in Western Maryland, and it's a little bit more heavily impacted out in Central Maryland. We are at the southern extreme of the range. So this is an area where wood turtles could be experiencing the effects of climate change first, or more heavily. So a bit about the natural history of this species. They're really long-lived. This is a really old male here. Very domed carapace. It's pretty smooth. It's got some annuli, but it's really, really smooth. So you know that it's an old turtle. Right here we have a notch in the marginal scutes, which is we notch them with a triangular file to give them a unique identifier so we can figure out who is who. And so they're a long-lived species. They can live actually over 50 years old in the wild. It may live up to 80 years or longer. And they have delayed sexual maturity. So this species might not reach sexual maturity until they're 10 or 12 years old. If you compare that to a lot of other species, they may have reproduced 11 or 12 times before they even got to reproduce as a wood turtle. So for this species, they have to wait a very long time to reproduce. And during that time, the juvenile survival is expected to be very low because of predators. Nest survival is very low, juvenile survival is very low. And then once they make it to adulthood and they're sexually active, their carapace is a lot stronger to withstand predators and flooding and stuff like that. And it's expected that they're able to survive a little better. Now, they are semi-aquatic and semi-terrestrial. Here's an example of two really bright young turtles mating in the bottom of a stream. During the winter is when they're primarily in these streams. So from about November to March, they spend most of this time in the streams, overwintering in deep pockets and pools with cold oxygenated water that brings their metabolism and physiological processes down. So they're just like sort of chilling out during the winter, bringing their metabolic rates down. And as the season gets warmer throughout the year, in April, we see turtles starting to leave the streams. And then once they're away from the streams, they may come back to the streams at night or intermittently throughout the season. However, in the active season, from about April to October, we see them acting more as a box turtle would, where they're hanging out in terrestrial habitats, such as like floodplains and forests and early successional habitats. Here's a turtle that we were radio tracking, and it's just partially concealed in a large patch of grasses in a big bed of poison ivy. That's one of the fun things about
one thing after another.
tracking these turtles is a lot of poison ivy out there. Now, I mentioned that they're a stream species and that they inhabit these rivers, but they don't inhabit any type of river. They actually have specific river habitat requirements. And here we have examples A, B, and C of a stream that is starting to bow back just a little bit. We call these meandering streams. So it's starting to meander here in example A. In example B, you get more dramatic bowbacks, more dramatic meanders. And when the water comes and rushes through a stream like this, it brings a lot of power, and that power actually pulls the sediment out and creates these deep plunge pools that the turtles use for overwintering. Now, if you're in an area like this and the water comes through and it creates a massive plunge pool, that sediment gets picked up in the water and it might get deposited over here on the next embankment. And that sediment usually or can form a nesting beach. So these meandering streams are important because they do create these deep pockets in these nesting beaches that are very sandy. And over here in C, we have a very dramatically meandering stream, so much so that a portion of itself has broken off and has formed an oxbow. And we We refer to these breakoffs as oxbows, and we find wood turtles using these systems quite a bit during the inactive and active season. So here's just an example of a meandering stream here in central Maryland. You can see it just like kind of cuts around this corner. And if there was a perfect ecological world and there weren't any invasive species like these Japanese hops and stiltgrass and other stuff, this would be a sandy embankment where the turtles could come up and nest. However, it's pretty filled up with invasives. So we've got a meandering stream here. We've got a deep plunge pool. We've got a sediment deposit here. And then on the sides of the streams, we actually have forests. We have a floodplain forest, and then it gives way to a large forest, and then open early successional habitat. So wood turtles not only need the specific types of streams, meandering streams, but they also need these mosaics of habitat, not just one type of habitat. They need areas to go warm up during early spring and bask. They need floodplain to forage in. They need these streams that have these deep pockets of pools where they can overwinter, and they have plentiful nesting habitats that are made by these embankments. Here's an example of a female that was nesting on one of those sandy embankments along a river. You can see that she's been pretty busy trying to find a good spot to nest. She's got a lot of sand on the top of her shell, and she's looking back at me like, oh God, I hope that that is not a raccoon. It's a very large raccoon if it is. So she's just trying to find a good place to nest. This is a really nice nesting beach on one of the creeks we're studying. Here's an example of a wood turtle using one of those early successional habitats I told you about. You know, they use these mosaics of habitat of early successional forests and rivers. And here we have one using a sedge meadow. And these are really great areas for wood turtles because they're so dense. It's really hard to tell, but there's a ton of vegetation in this photo. And without the radio transmitter and radio tracking this turtle, we would have never found it. But it's at the bottom of the sedge or rush species and completely down there, cryptic basking, hanging out during the active season. These are really good places for the turtles to hide and to find invertebrates. They spend a lot of time looking for invertebrates like slugs and worms. They eat a couple other things, but a lot of the times you'll find them eating slugs and worms. And they do have some very interesting behaviors. Here's a wood turtle that I recorded earlier this year that was out and was doing something that we refer to as the rain dance. So here's this male wood turtle. It is dropping its plastron onto the ground, the forest floor, and just putting pressure on the forest floor and using its arms to press around to push pressure on the leaf litter to scare worms out. So that's a pretty complex behavior right there, trying to not only like look for worms and invertebrates, but they're, simulating rain is what it's thought to be doing. They call it the rain dance, but that's a complex behavior. It makes me wonder, like how intelligent are these turtles? They're very long lived. It might be a 70-year-old turtle that he might have learned this, 50 years ago. It's something really incredible to think about. Now, unfortunately, this species is declining, and there are a lot of things that are causing these populations to decline. I took this photo just because I thought it was a great representation of habitat change. This is not to say that shopping carts are causing turtle decline, but a really good representation of habitat change. So if you have one of these perfect habitat mosaics that wood turtles require, and you put a grocery store in just a couple hundred yards away from the stream, you might get major flooding and you might get a grocery cart that washes down. Grocery carts aren't the issue, but with the flooding and runoff comes all sorts of sediment, all sorts of nasty chemicals. The sediment comes in, it might fill in some of those deep pools that the turtles need to overwinter in. It might bring down a bunch of invasive plant seeds that'll cover up the nesting beaches and cause them to become shaded out. So habitat change and degradation is one of the biggest threats to this species. The more we change the landscape, it's going to be harder for these turtles to survive. And if you think back to those habitat suitability models I was showing you earlier, the areas that are least impaired or really looking great for wood turtles are the areas that are further away from human development. And if you're a turtle and you think that you're going to go up and find a early successional habitat and sooner or later you actually come across a combine because you're in a soybean field and you get disked up. That's just really unfortunate because they making these changes in the habitat can cause all sorts of ecological traps for these turtles, such as roads. Turtles might leave the stream and go up into the floodplain or the forest to forage. I know that that's what this turtle was doing. You can see slightly here, should have pulled the shadows out on this photo, but got a slug mustache is what I call it, but there's some remnants of slug that this turtle was eating. I found it crossing a road out in Western Maryland during a rainstorm, and if I wasn't paying attention, I could have easily run this turtle over. Road mortality causes huge problems for turtle populations. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate that all these turtles get hit on the road. And when adults get hit on the road, it's a real big problem and it can cause populations to plummet pretty quickly, especially when populations may be small. And remember what I said earlier that the juvenile survival is expected to be very low, and the turtles do not reach sexual maturity until they're 12 years old. So those adults need to survive and be reproducing all the time every year for there to be a sustained population. And when you start getting some of those turtles hit on the road, that can really cause a steep and fast decline of the turtle population overall. Predators are another big issue that we see causing issues for turtle populations. Here's a series of photos I recorded with a trail camera monitoring a nesting beach up in New England. And yeah, this is a wood turtle that was out doing a nesting foray and came across a raccoon. A raccoon was trying to eat it. Raccoons and other predators can really cause massive problems for turtle populations and especially rare turtle populations. Nest success is very, very low because we have an increased abundance of predators on the landscape because of all of these changes in the landscape. We created all of this edge habitat by sort of sectioning off the forests and creating roads, which is great for mesopredators like raccoons, coyotes, possums, and we've eliminated their predators so they can kind of do whatever they want. And we've got French fries and garbage all over the place where they can just kind of go around and get really fat and have big populations. So mesopredators are on the rise and turtle populations are on the decline, and nest predation and turtle predation of adults is a big issue. I know that several of the turtles we're currently radio tracking are missing limbs because of predators. And we did have a evidence of one of our turtles getting eaten by a predator this year. Pretty unfortunate, but here is another thing that we see being a huge issue for turtle populations. It's illegal collection. For the black market, international and domestic trade, these are a bunch of box turtles that were in the process of being shipped to another country. And yeah, unfortunately, there's a huge international and domestic market for rare turtle species. And when you have somebody going out and collecting hundreds of turtles or tens of turtles or even a handful of turtles from populations, it can cause them to decline. So the best way to avoid this from like a personal level is if you ever find a rare turtle or a rare species generally, it's best to just like refrain from posting the location online. I know a lot of naturalists use iNaturalist now, and it's a really great tool. You can use it for lots of excellent things. I use it for helping identify plants all the time. But if you ever find a rare turtle or a rare animal or a rare plant, it's best to just not post it on there, if, in my opinion, especially for a species that has very specific habitat requirements. So even with the wood turtle and some of the other rare turtle species, they are automatically going to be obscured on iNaturalist, and you see that the map doesn't have a specific pin for where it was found, but they put it in a box. And that box is small enough that you can find the habitat that it is in or that it is likely to be in because their habitats are so specific. So it's best to just not post those locations online so that you can avoid somebody with ill intent showing up to a site and trying to catch all of the turtles and ship them across the world. Another issue that is causing turtles to decline is disease. We know from a lot of studies on box turtles and other similar species that disease can really lower the fitness of turtles and cause them to decline and feel those pressures of other different ailments or chemicals in the system a lot sharper, can cause mortality events. Unfortunately, like ranavirus and some other types of turtle and reptile and amphibian viruses are pretty widespread these days. And there is some good research out there on um, on these diseases in turtles, but we really need a lot more information out there about how it really is affecting these populations. But we know that it is affecting them. Now you're probably wondering, all right, this guy's just crazy about these turtles. Who cares? Just a turtle, whatever. But turtles are really important. Not only are they ecologically significant, but they're important on a human cultural dynamic. We all know turtle, the tortoise, and the hare. We've all grew up with that fable. We all know the pizza-loving Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Franklin. And even here in Maryland, we have the Maryland Terrapin as the University of Maryland mascot. So they've got a really fond place in our hearts as a human species, and they've been around for longer than we have, and just a really awesome animal that we've always kind of admired as a human species. They're really long-lived, and I do think that we should respect our elders and try to conserve their populations as best as we can. The subfamily Amidae formed around 56 to 40 million years ago, whereas the human family formed about 8 million years ago. So they've been around for a very long time. They're very ancestral, and they have important ecological roles. Here is some footage of a wood turtle eating some wineberries. Wineberries are non-native, so it's probably dispersing those seeds, but it does some very important seed dispersal and germination for some of our native plants. May apples are thought to be only dispersed and germinated by box turtles and wood turtles. And if we lose box turtles and wood turtles, we could lose the May apple and whatever is reliant on the May apple. So it's best to avoid those domino effects of like losing one thing, then you lose the next thing, and it's all goes downhill from there. Just best to conserve every species we can. And turtles are indicators of very healthy habitats in interconnected ecosystems. And whenever we have healthy, clean water, healthy ecosystems, it's better for humans. We like living in clean areas, and it means that we're living in an area that's least impacted when we're living in a more biodiverse area. So turtles are great. Let's keep them around. Now, unfortunately, as I've alluded to, they're declining throughout their entire range. They're considered endangered by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. They are listed as endangered in Canada, and they have been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act here in the United States. In Maryland, they're considered vulnerable and are a Class B species. That means that you cannot possess a wood turtle in Maryland. You cannot have a pet turtle that is a wood turtle in Maryland, or be in possession of one in any way, shape, or form without a scientific collections permit from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. On the positive side, there are lots of conservation efforts currently underway throughout the United States and Canada for this species, and I am very excited to see some of these projects underway. And I am a positive for the future of this species because we have a lot of bright and dedicated people working on this animal here currently. All right, so we're going to get into part B. Now, hopefully you all know a little bit about the wood turtle. We're going to go do a little bit of a deeper dive into the research and conservation efforts that we're doing at Susquehannock Wildlife Society. Here's a couple of photos of just a turtle basking on a beaver dam, and one of our juvenile head starts with a radio transmitter on the left side of its carapace. So, as I've alluded to, we're in a very important part of the wood turtle's range where the habitat is very impaired, and the effects of climate change could be felt here pretty dramatically compared to some of the other parts of the range. Additionally, we're at the southeastern extreme of the range where a few robust scientific studies have taken place, and we could learn a lot more about this species in this section of the range. And we have two creeks that we're studying right now currently. One of them has historic unpublished data, and one has no data. And both of them are adjacent to each other. We started researching both of these streams in 2017. And because of that historic data We know that one of these creeks has declined precipitously, actually by 5/6 in just 30 years, which is quite dramatic. And we learned of this and started doing long-term monitoring, starting with visual encounter surveys. And we're employing a bunch of different methods to better understand these populations of wood turtles so we can better conserve them. And so we have 5 facets of objectives, but they're all playing at the same ideas here of better understanding the species in Central Maryland so that we can conserve it better. So first, we're hoping to estimate population abundance and look at the demographics of the population and see where the population is going and its trajectory. We're looking at habitat use and home range and how these variables seasonally change so that we can create a habitat management plan and suit this habitat so that the turtles live in an area that's really good for them. We're also looking at woody debris use within streams so that we can better understand the habitat within the streams. We are looking at the nesting ecology of wood turtles, and we are doing some headstarting. And all of these 5 different facets kind of play on the idea of identifying and reducing the threats that are causing it to decline while learning as much about these populations as we can in the meantime. And our overarching goal is to encourage the population to grow. So we started doing a population assessment in 2017, where we started implementing the standardized visual encounter surveys, which were published by the Northeastern Wood Turtle Working Group. They essentially consist of mapping out a kilometer section of a stream and visually searching it for wood turtles. Once you find a wood turtle, you grab it and you mark it by using a triangular file. You can mark its marginal scutes. It doesn't hurt the turtle at all. It's like the shell's made out of keratin, so it's like filing your nails. And when we do that, you can give it a identification code so you know exactly who it is when you capture it the next time. And sometimes when we're doing these surveys, we catch 0 turtles. Sometimes we catch 2. Sometimes we get really lucky. We might have more than that, maybe 4. And we are not to assume that the population size is 4, 2, or 0. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And by marking the turtles and releasing them and recapturing them and knowing how that plays out over time, we can plug that information into a statistical calculation and get really good estimates for population abundance. It's called capture, mark, recapture estimatation, and we are doing that here. Every time we capture a turtle, we're recording things like body mass, morphometric measurements, like how long is the turtle, how wide is the turtle, we're taking measurements like that. And one of the things we're very interested in is studying the demographic rates. How many males do we have compared to females? How many adults do we have to juveniles? Right now, our sex ratio is very even. However, we have a lot more adults than we do juveniles. And we're going to be making a historical comparison with that unpublished data set with the creek that has the current and historic data. And we will be doing a population viability analysis, which is just a fancy way of looking at where the current population is and where it is projected to be going over time. And what that will tell us is what we can do to help conserve the population. And so far, we've marked 26 turtles in both creeks. And we are using radiotelemetry to answer a lot of questions. In addition to the visual encounter surveys, the visual encounter surveys are really great for capturing turtles and confirming that you have a population and estimating abundance. But when you put radio transmitters on a turtle, it allows you to make repeated captures of the turtle, which is really important because you can form robust data sets. So here we have examples of radio transmitters on the carapace of these turtles. They're less than 5% of the total body weight, so it does not affect their behavior or movement patterns at all. And it's really good for making repeated captures. Here is Rebecca Pritt, our research assistant out there tracking turtles. She's got the radio receiver in her hand. Essentially, the radio transmitter on the turtle sends out a signal and it produces a beep on the receiver. And when you're facing the turtle, you get a louder beep. When you're facing away from the turtle, you get a quieter beep. And from this, you can triangulate and find out exactly where the turtle is. So by making these repeated observations, we're able to collect a lot of data. So Rebecca here is about to collect GPS coordinates, going to look at what the canopy cover is, what is the macro habitat type, is it in a creek, is it in a floodplain, is it in a forest, is it in a vernal pool. We're looking at microhabitat, distance to stream, and a few other parameters. And these are really important to understand because if you're going to do habitat management, it is best to know how these different variables change seasonally and how the turtles are using the landscape. So in addition to the habitat use, we're using the home range data that we're collecting through GPS points and making polygons. We overlay those on a map and we're able to see where the turtles are using, what parts of our site the turtles are using more often than others in different times of years so that we're able to manage the habitat while not causing any incidental mortality or injury of the turtles. Like if we wanted to cut down some trees so that they had more early successional sunning habitat, we would want to do that when it would least impact the turtles and when we had the highest confidence that they would be in the streams. Conversely, if we wanted to do something in the stream corridor where we were going to like work on incisement of the banks or fell some trees into the creek to give it a little bit more woody debris, we would want to do that when we were confident that the turtles are out of the creek so that we don't accidentally hurt any of the turtles. We are developing this habitat management plan, thankfully to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for funding this portion of our study to study 12 adults and make this habitat uh, management plan for our sites here in Central Maryland. So we're very thankful to have the funding and be able to better understand this turtle population. Another thing that we're doing is looking at the woody debris in streams. Um, a lot of times when you're doing visual encounter surveys, you'll walk into a stream and you'll look around and go straight for the woody debris. At least I do. I go look straight for the woody debris because that's where I assume that the wood turtles are going to be in the cover of these woody debris structures, not in the open river substrate. However, there hasn't been a lot of research whether they're actively selecting for these portions of the stream. So with a colleague of mine, Mike Jones, we have developed a protocol to test whether these turtles are using these portions of the stream with woody debris more often than they are not. And we have collaborators at 8 different sites, 6 in the United States and 2 in Canada that are employing these methods so that we can better understand how the wood turtles are using the stream. So every time we are tracking these turtles and we find one in the stream, we're creating like a visual circle around the turtle within 3 meters. We're recording all of the woody debris. So we get a turtle in the stream. Is it in a log jam? Is it in a root mass? Is it under a single log? And if so, what's the diameter of that woody debris? What is its length? We're hoping that we're able to identify some trends such as like the size, structure, and class of these woody debris structures so that we can inform some habitat management through this study. So we're collecting some woody debris, describing the woody debris at the turtle within 3 meters. And then we are also taking a paired random point in the stream. And we're collecting the same variables within 3 meters of that paired random point. So we've got the turtle data and then we've got the paired random point. And from the turtle data and the paired random point, we're able to put them into a statistical analysis and better understand whether there is any relationships playing out there. And these tests may help us better understand whether there are relationships, and if there are, we might be able to inform habitat management. That is our ultimate goal with this. Another thing that we're very interested in is nesting ecology. Here we have a female. She is nesting. You can see her ovipositing an egg into one of these nesting areas. This is a very sandy soil area on one of our creeks. And right here, she has got a radio transmitter, nicely camouflaged, onto the right side of her carapace. And unfortunately, she's got a huge crack down the left side of her carapace, but it is completely healed. And this is actually the mother of our first cohort of Head Starts. And yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things we're doing is we are doing nesting surveys and we're doing sweeps of the nesting beaches during the nesting season to try to find nesting females as they're nesting. That's the important part. So we're radio tracking our adult females during the nesting season, but we're also checking in on these nesting beaches to incidentally encounter these turtles nesting. And when we do encounter them nesting, first thing we do is we take a photo like this. We take one quick photo, get it from above, and try to identify exactly where the nest cavity is. and then we leave. We move away to the other side of the creek, and we wait for that turtle to drop the eggs. We don't want to disturb her. So we move away, wait for the process to be finished, and then as soon as we see that she's moving away, we come back with a cage and we put a cage over the nest to avoid to keep the predators from eating the nest. We're getting some really interesting data on the microhabitat level of which areas they're selecting for, and that can be really important for creating new nest sites and doing nest site enhancement. We're also learning a lot about clutch size and nest success patterns when you account for no predation because of the nest cage. And the clutch size and nest success data are important for important variables for informing a population viability analysis, like I mentioned earlier. So far we've identified 5 nesting beaches at our 2 sites, and we have caged 3 nests. That may not sound very impressive, but wood turtles may move over a mile in a single day to nest. So I'm pretty happy with those numbers. We're going to be increasing them, working on increasing them. But it is quite laborious to find even one wood turtle nest. And yeah, so one of the things that we are concerned about in addition to predation is flooding and nest success. Here is some time-lapse camera footage. I am monitoring nesting beaches at our wood turtle sites with time-lapse trail cameras that take a photo every single minute. And we're able to get better understanding of when the turtles are using these nesting beaches and what predators are coming up to look at the nests. And we're not always able to be out in the field. You can't be out there all the time. So these are really great ways of monitoring the nesting beaches when we're not around. So this was June 4th of this year. I was across the street watching with the street. I was across the creek watching with binoculars, waiting for this turtle to lay its eggs. Um, just when you see the water recede, we've got a wood turtle on the left and we've got a snapping turtle on the right. I was waiting for the wood turtle to drop her eggs. It was 7 o'clock, 7 p.m., and I got a notification on my phone that there was a tornado, active tornado in the area. So I got out, left the field site, came back exactly 2.5 hours later when it was safe to do so at 9:30. And by that time, the floodplain was entirely engulfed in water. With flash flooding, the stream was impassable and the entire floodplain was flooded out. And you can see here that my camera is completely engulfed in the water, and my camera was 4 feet off of the ground shooting this. So at this point, we already had evidence that 4 of our wood turtles had nested this season. And we're assuming that any of the turtles that nested before this flood in the floodplain, their nests were unviable. And this is something we were pretty shocked by. We had heard stories of other sites experiencing similar things like this, but to see it like this was pretty shocking. So this is one of the things we're very interested in. How often does this occur? And are there any ways to prepare for this? Now, of the nests that do make it, we are when we cage them, we are actually removing those eggs and using those for head starting. So in collaboration with the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, we are head starting wood turtles. And head starting is a experimental process. The term was created back in the late 60s, early 70s, and you're essentially giving the turtles a head start at life by increasing their juvenile survival. Here is a turtle up top. This is a wood turtle that's about a week old. It's very tiny. It's about 8 grams in body mass. It is so young that you can actually see its egg tooth here, which they use to pierce the egg and crawl out during hatching. And the turtle eggs hatch typically in late August, early September. And if they do hatch, most of them aren't able to hatch because of the predation and the flooding. But when they do hatch, they might be around 8 to 12 grams. And if they make it through to that first spring, by the next August, they may be 12 to 15 grams, maybe a little heavier than that if they're really, really lucky. But typically you don't see much growth in turtle hatchlings during the first few years. Now, if you bring them indoors right after they hatch and you incubate them, the eggs hatch, and you feed them. During that first 9 months, they grow rapidly and their shells get a lot more hard. They get a lot bigger and they become a little bit more resilient to predators. So that's what we're doing here. The turtle on the bottom is an example of a turtle that was recently released It is 1 year old, but it is the size of a 6 or 7 year old turtle. And that is what headstarting does. It essentially brings the turtle to a larger size so that it has a higher chance of survival, hoping to boost juvenile recruitment. And yeah, so that's pretty much that process. We have a biosecure lab at the Susquehannock Wildlife Center that we're doing this head starting at, where we're using in situ eggs to bring them in and do the head starting. Whereas the Maryland Zoo has some captive breeding individuals that they are nesting, and those eggs are also head started and are released at our site as well. And we're testing for them for diseases before we release them because we do not want to be putting any new diseases out there in the wild. And we're monitoring them with radio telemetry. You can see this little guy here was outfitted with a tiny little transmitter, and we are having really good data collection from this individual and other individuals, and we're able to glean some inferences about their survival, the site fidelity, and what their habitat use and home range is like. We're very interested in the survival and site fidelity of these turtles because if you're going through the effort to raise all these turtles in captivity during winter, it can be really expensive and time costly. It's just it's a robust process. And we are trying to make sure that these turtles are actually surviving, they're actually staying within the site. This is a very experimental process, and we're hoping that it will hopefully boost some recruitment in this population. But we know that it is not a catch-all, and it's not what's going to ultimately save this population. It will give it a boost, but you really need to bringing in conservation actions from like multi-facets. So we're working at the juveniles, but you're also working to reduce the adult mortality through reducing those threats of predation and road mortality and making the habitat more conducive for the species in total. So this is our third year of head starting. In 2023, 6 turtles were released, and then in 2024, another 12 were released, bringing our total release up to 18. And we're on track to release another 8 at the end of next year, bringing us up to 26. And we're very happy to see this happen, and hopefully we will have some interesting results here shortly. And just in summary here, we are doing a multifaceted research and conservation project for wood turtles in central Maryland, and we are estimating the population abundance and looking at the trajectory of the population through population viability analysis. We're looking at the home range, habitat use, and seasonal activity and habitat patterns so that we can create a habitat management plan. We're looking at the woody debris use within streams so that we can hopefully better understand how turtles are using their habitats in the streams, not only at our site, but throughout the range. And we're looking at the nesting ecology, nest success, and nest site selection of wood turtles at our sites. And we are doing some head starting to increase our juvenile survival. And all of these 5 different facets or avenues of conservation and research are all playing and building on the idea of identifying the threats that are causing this population to decline so that we can reduce them. And overall, we're hoping that we can encourage this population to grow. And thank you all for coming here and listening tonight. I could talk for hours about turtles, so thank you. It's been a pleasure thank you, Matthew, specifically for having me here. And I'd like to thank volunteers and interns, specifically Rebecca Pritt, for all of her hard time in the field. And I would like to acknowledge that part of this work was supported by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, that radio telemetry of the adults and the habitat management plan. So we're very thankful for that. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore have been fundamental at providing materials and oversight of this project and have been great collaborators. So thank you to all of them. And with that, you can feel free to reach out to me at john@susquewildlife.org or check us out at susquehannockwildlife.org. And if you feel so inclined, we are selling wood turtle merchandise, and we are a verified nonprofit on Bonfire. So if you scan that QR code, any of the proceeds will go to our research and conservation efforts at Susquehannock Wildlife Society. Yeah, I will take any questions if we have some time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, John. John Garrison, everybody. That was awesome. There's some questions in the chat that we can get to. I had one quick, I guess, terminology question. Earlier, when you had the slide of the raccoon and you mentioned there was a word that you used to describe several predators like raccoons and coyotes and possums, and I think it was mesopredators. What is that?
Yeah, we refer to them as mesopredators as or like mid-tier level predators. So high level predators are like carnivores, wolves, cougars, bears, stuff like that.
Sure.
Below them, we've got these meso or low level carnivores that are scavengers, but they're also predators. That includes some of the carnivora like raccoons, but also mustelids like fishers and foxes, coyotes, possums, and then very lower level predators are like small mammals and stuff like
So
that.
MISO just means like mid-level.
Yeah, pretty
It's
much
not an
just like
acronym for anything.
in between. No, it's not like an acronym.
All right, cool. I was wondering about that. Thank you. So here's some questions that have come in the chat. Are studies like these being done in Virginia?
Um, there is a lot of work going on in Virginia. The Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute is doing quite a bit with wood turtles there.
Do beavers play a role in creating the deep pools and woody debris piles, and could the beavers play a role in improving habitat?
So that is a question. That's a great question, and a lot of wood turtle researchers are currently asking that question. We do see a lot of beaver activity in the streams that I currently work in, but the flooding usually wipes the woody debris that the beavers create out of the area. I've seen robust wood turtle populations in areas with sustained beaver impoundments and other places. I know that people have had flooding caused by beavers, so it's not clear whether they're always positive or always negative or neutral for the species. But
Got it. A couple of questions about head starting, and I had a similar question in my mind as well. First of all, does head starting accelerate the age at which they reproduce? And another person is asking, does head starting make bigger, mature wood turtles, giving them an advantage in life, perhaps?
so a lot of the research on head starting is just currently being studied. However, there are some partners in other states that have been doing head starting on wood turtle for quite a while now. Specifically in Jersey, I think New Jersey's been doing it for longer than anybody else, and they have reported. I think that their turtles are becoming a little earlier sexually mature. And there's some other species in the literature where that's quite evident as well.
And then are the adults also larger, or do they just grow larger faster and then level out?
No, the adults don't really get that much larger. They kind
Right.
of just like cap out.
Got it. Question about stilt grass. You mentioned the problem with invasives on the sandy shores. Does stilt grass negatively affect nesting sites?
Yeah, stiltgrass and a bunch of other invasive plants definitely impact nest sites. We get a lot of stiltgrass and Japanese hops and knotweed and mugwort and on our nesting beaches, and they reduce the available habitat for nesting. These turtles like open substrate where they can crawl up and dig out a nest pit in the sand or sediment. And if 95% of the nesting beach is knotweed or mugwort or stiltgrass, it really reduces the available nesting habitat.
Got it. Other questions, folks? Okay, it's just about 8 o'clock, so I guess we can wrap this up if there's no other questions. Thank you, John. That was really interesting, and we all have to like keep monitoring this work that you're doing. And thank you for doing the work because that's so important. And I know that your team is mostly volunteers, so good on them, and that's fantastic. All right, take care, John Garrison, everyone. We all enjoyed that, learned a lot. Thanks so much. Happy holidays to all. See you soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.